Until a woman can truly differentiate the masculine and the gifts of masculine nature, the gifts of a masculine man, like the profound blessings, my sense and what I see over and over is that she ends up disappointed. She ends up frustrated. Her expectations have not been met.
This is episode number 564 with Gillian Pothier. We are going to be talking about why so many women are unfulfilled in their romantic relationships. And she has her own theories about this. And you are going to love this conversation. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Last First Date Radio, where we believe it is never too late to go on your last first date. And to support you, I've written 2 books. The first one is called Becoming a Woman of Value, How to Thrive in Life and Love. And this book is really to help you build your core confidence and learn to show up, stand up, and speak up. And the second book was published this year. It's called Choice Points in Dating. And I wrote this book because so many people would tell me that they felt they weren't a choice in different parts of their dating journey. And that just kept coming up for me, both in my clients and in the people I dated, like, I had no choice. And so this book is full of exercises and stories, personal stories, client stories, to help you to know who to date, how to think about dating, to know you're always a choice, and to give you the exercises to get there. Every week, I share a tip on how to become a woman of value from the first book. And by the way, they're both available on Amazon for Kindle or paperback. This week's tip is step number 4, love your body, which I think is very apropos. These are kind of random. They're never really geared to the person who I'm going to be interviewing, but they somehow tie in some way. And I just believe that we are so negative about our bodies, and we think about our bodies in terms of the societal ideal for beauty, which changes, by the way, all the time. And so if we can really just focus on the love we have for our own bodies, because our bodies are pretty magnificent. They are amazing beings. Like I'm always amazed at the functionality of my body, at the beauty of the skin, the eyes. There's so much to be grateful for. So my challenge to you this week is to focus on one area of your body that you are grateful for and give it some love, because it's definitely gotten a lot of self-loathing in the past. And before I bring Jillian on, I want to welcome you to join my Facebook group. It's called Your Last First Date. And we are a group for women over 40 who are looking for a positive place for support to help you along the way when you're looking for love. There are so many groups out there that do not focus on positive support. It's just a place to vent and to bash men and to talk about how awful everything is. And that just makes you feel worse. Honestly, maybe you feel good for a moment, but most people leave those groups because they are not curated, they are not focused. And our group is. And I go live every week in our group to talk about topics that are relevant to women who are dating and in relationships at this stage in life. So join us there at Your Last First Date. And now for my guest, Gillian Pothier. Through her writing, teaching, and feminine mentorship, she helps women repair and co-create fulfilling lifelong bonds with the men in their lives. And whether it's their husbands or their lovers, their fathers, their sons, their brothers, their former husbands or partners, friends, colleagues, all men. We're talking about all men here. And Jillian studied literature and visual art at Bennington College, and she received her MA in depth psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute. Her work centers on what becomes possible when we understand masculine and feminine nature and co-creation through the lens of psychology, beauty, fairytale, and Jungian archetypes. Welcome to the podcast, Jillian.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for having me. Such a delight to be here with you.
Let's first talk about you and how you ended up in this field. Tell us a little of your backstory, your relationship history, if you don't mind.
Sure, of course. So I would say that there's kind of 2 lineages to arriving at my current like how I support women in the world and what I live inside of in terms of my own relationship. So one of them is in some ways like academic and professional. So I grew up in my 20s and 30s and lived a very kind of masculinized life as a hotshot producer in New York and LA. So I was very endowed in kind of the productive qualities of the masculine within. So I was very much participating in kind of a masculinized experience for many years until I reached this point where I was in pain. I remember every day that I'd walk over the threshold into my fancy production office, it was like, this is kind of a gilded cage in some ways. And I would just speak to the little girl inside or kind of that feminine quintessence. And I was like, oh my gosh, just a little while longer, until I was finally able to summon a combination of enough pain and enough kind of courage of the heart to resign. And at that point, after a little bit of kind of a personal descent, I went to graduate school at Pacifica, which is a graduate school that focuses on psychology through the lens of archetype and through the lens of Carl Jung. And this was an incredible kind of experience of epiphany and confirmation, because Carl Jung, and in this lineage of psychoanalysis and psychotherapy, illuminates the masculine and feminine aspects of the human psyche. So recognizing that as anatomical woman, there is still, in my belief system, a masculine aspect to my feminine soul, vice versa for men. So this began a powerful kind of seeding that allowed me to develop a lens where I was able to look through my own relational history, debacles, great beauty, and bring a nurturing lens of self-compassion, of understanding the experiences I had participated in. I began to look at the feminine line within my own family, from grandmother through mothers, what was passed from womb to womb in terms of beliefs around men, beliefs around the masculine, how that is depending upon the transmission and the messages that we receive, either unconsciously or directly spoken, how that impacts us so deeply epigenetically around how we create with men, because relationships are a creation. They are a co-creation. And for so many women, and I include myself in this, I would consciously say, I want a devotional, highly kind of erotic, beautiful experience of relationship and partnership with a man, with a man. But my deeper pain body, or the messages that lived within me epigenetically, created kind of conflict within. So even though I was stating what was true for me, what my body held in terms of some of these wound templates, and also what my own beliefs were that are often corroborated socially and culturally about men, about the masculine nature. Oh my gosh, so butted heads. So I was in a unconscious kind of state of conflict. And when particularly the feminine is not clear in her truth and her desire, that is very reflected in some of the confusion or despair or layers of drama that are perpetuated in our relationships as mirrorings of our own deeper confusion, I think. So in a in a bit of a nutshell, I would say that those are the two, the academic kind of revelation, and then just my own frustration around not being able to create the beauty, the magnificence, the love that I so felt in my heart was part of my path with men.
What were some of the beliefs that you noticed from generation to generation in your family?
So this is influenced, as it will be for each of us, by what has existed inside of our families. My mom, in this case, had a lot of wounding around men in the masculine. So in order to love her daughter well, she gave me many messages around the lack of safety of the masculine. She told me, and this is the greatest apology my mother's ever given me, is the ways that she was so disrespectful about the man that was my father, who we were close with growing up, despite a divorce. She would be very disrespectful of my father. Meanwhile, my mother is raising a daughter and a son who are literally the embodied half of our nature comes from this man. So, I hear all kinds of narratives around how unsafe men are. Always have a back door, always have your own money, always have a plan. It's never truly safe to trust men. Men will leave, all of these narratives that you would never think. You would look at my mom and that was so hidden within her, these narratives. So I grew up feeling very apprehensive around men, including my own father. And so even receiving his benevolent attempts at deeply fathering me, I always kind of pushed away or didn't let myself, like my little girl, like fathering receptors, truly receive that love, because I had been unconsciously kind of indoctrinated by my mom's wounded experience that had not been fully metabolized. And this was true in her family line. So in so many ways, one of my teachings is, in so many ways, the father wound travels through the mother line in families until it reaches a point where someone can rise this into consciousness and make different choices.
There's such power in making different choices and recognizing what got passed down. It's just fascinating. The unconscious messages, sometimes they're very blatant, sometimes they're less blatant. I remember when I started doing this work and seeing some of the messages that I received in my home, and I don't think they were passed down from my grandmother to my mother, but my mother married very young. She was 19. She married a much older man, and I believe that's connected to her losing her father when she was 13 and thinking, I need a dad, and then marrying a man who could not be a provider, protector that she was looking for. And so the resentment grew. There was a lot of resentment that was vocalized. And basically, men don't come through for you. Men will, just betray you. Men, in some ways, they're just worthless. So, all those messages that women get about make your own money and do all those things, I wasn't getting those messages directly, but I see so many clients who do, you need to never trust that a man is going to stay and get your own life together, which you should get your own life together, but not for that reason.
Yeah, these are fine lines, because there is beautiful opportunity for women to be in the full expression of their giftedness in the world, and to receive, financial reward if that is, for that, if they choose to express that kind of into the cultural marketplace. But I think that in some ways that it's almost like the pendulum has swung so far. And I also very much support women in making a choice to not do that, and to choose to be home and to be a homemaker, and to, raise her children and at home, and, do things that are very kind of yin, that I feel like our culture has begun to kind of shame in some ways women who make that's kind of one of the deep shadows of feminism, is that in some ways women who do feel called to this kind of more yin expression of their feminine as mother and as kind of devotional wife, that there can be some shaming of those aspects. So these are complicated cultural kind of tectonic plates that shift around during a woman's lifetime. And I think finding her kind of true North Star, like what is deeply true for her, for each individual woman, can be quite a heroine's journey in a woman's life, because there's so much to distill between personal beliefs that have been kind of unconsciously injected into our consciousness. And then culturally, it's often corroborated, like what are the archetypes of the masculine that we see most prevalently? There's like a Homer Simpson type, like where are we actually being shown and where are we actually receiving messages around the brilliance and the benevolence and the goodness of true masculine nature. And there are exceptions, of course, but very pervasively, we tend to have a degraded perception culturally, societally, about men and the masculine.
First of all, there's so many layers of how we got here and who we are today, and how to come up with our own way of being in the world. Like, how do we even decide that based on how we grow up and based on society? And so there's so much also of the unfulfillment in romantic partnerships. And one of my group monitors today had a beautiful exercise. I have 7 monitors, and every day that they monitor, they post something for the group to get them to think and to see things a little differently. And so this exercise was about to close your eyes and think about the people that you love in your life, whether it's your child or a partner or a parent or whatever, and think about the qualities about them that make you love them. And then think about the romantic partner that you want. And do they have the same qualities? And often it's not at all. What really makes us fall in love with somebody is not their height, their 401k, we look for those things, but what about those qualities that really matter? And so for people, especially women who have this false idea of romance or the difference between romance and real partnership, and help us understand how to be more fulfilled and what leads to this lack of fulfillment.
I believe that one of the deepest healing paths that women can journey, particularly women seeking partnership, long-term relationship, marriage, is to what I call, this is my language, like begin a path of spiritual repair with men and the masculine. So this is very much what I guide women to walk, is to begin to discern, what are the beliefs that I have? And to orient themselves to understanding these kind of wild creatures called men that we are in an embedded context with in this lifetime. This is very much where the work, I think, of like Alison Armstrong is quite gorgeous, where she truly begins to illuminate the idiosyncratic nature of men. So many women use feminized qualities, use qualities of the feminine to describe what they desire in a man. For me, and I'm going to come in a little tough cookies here, that's at the level, like it's disrespectful right out of the gate. Like before we've even begun the journey of tiptoeing out, if we don't begin to understand men, if we don't begin to understand the truth of masculine nature, which is very different from feminine nature, this is where Alison Armstrong says things like, And it's humorous, but there's so much gravitas in this. Men are not just large, hairy women. That is something that so many women truly need to make full contact with. Like, what does that mean? Because until a woman can truly differentiate the masculine and the gifts of masculine nature, the gifts of a masculine man, like the profound blessings, my sense and what I see over and over is that she ends up disappointed. She ends up frustrated. Her expectations have not been met because she has not yet potentially truly fallen in love with men, with masculine nature. And that will, of course, like saturate her dating experiences, often leading to precisely what you've just named, Sandy, like so much lack of fulfillment, frustration, expectations that are crestfallen, disappointment. And many times, it's a fine line for me because I also want to share, I do not bypass the truth of poor masculine behavior, or let's say potentially even harmful masculine behavior. But there has to be a deeper understanding beyond just that narrative in order for a woman to be able to create like a relationship of the ages, truly legacy love. One of the things that I share is that so many women are like, I want a great man. Jillian, I want a great man. I'm like, fabulous. Then you have to be a great woman. You have to be great in your feminine. And that journey is beautiful and a little bit holding the feet to the fire at times, so that women are not just sourcing in ego and entitlement. As you said, like they make lists about men that are like Build-A-Bear, 6'1", this type of 401k. I'm like, that is arrogant, that is egoic, and that is sourced in entitlement. And I completely understand that sometimes that is compensatory for wound or fear or trepidation. But there's a deeper thing here that women have to be responsible for if they want to create like the relationship that is truly fulfilling to them. And that foundation is based on respect, honor, reverence of self and him, true masculine nature. So that this is, as you can hear, like this is a big adventure. And there's lots and lots of layers in this, Sandy.
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember when I first came across Alison Armstrong's work, and it was so eye-opening for me because of how I grew up with a lot of emasculation of putting men down. Men are worthless. Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. You can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. Plus, you can now stream your favorite podcasts like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any of your devices. Get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 30 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/lastfirstdate to learn more and claim this offer. Let's talk about some of the qualities of masculine nature as you're describing it. And what are some of the ways that we can understand men?
So what motivates a man in the world is going to be, in my perception, quite different than what motivates a woman. So I feel like, and there's going to be exceptions to everything I say. So I also want to say this right out of the gate. I find that masculine nature is very oriented towards leadership and finds great fulfillment in the experience of leading benevolently. We look at this word patriarchy and, like all the kind of smashing of the patriarchy. And I understand the ideological history of that word, but at essence, we also hear the word patriarch, which is kind of a leader of the family, patria. And so anyhow, like to restore some of the benevolence and brilliance of masculine leadership inside of relationships, inside of family structures, and to have that leadership be provided from, oh my gosh, attuned, benevolent, conscious, non-egoic kind of masculine gifting. I think that men have an emphasis, for example, on productivity, that it's not just that his value is determined by what he produces in the world, but part of the initiations for men is imposing their, I use this word so much when I talk about men, but benevolent, their goodness, their will to create onto the world. So I think that men have a deep drive to be satisfied by watching what they build kind of be erected, architected in the world. I think that men have a deep desire for efficacy and clarity, that sometimes the emotional waters of the feminine can be a little confounding, quite honestly. I think that men have a certain like A to B, like a we start here and we go there, and they can map things very instinctively. Men are gifted with, and we see this throughout kind of some great myths. I always say that kind of men see in the world, and the masculine sees like in the world. They see plans. They see kind of how the dominoes or the chess game will go, whereas the feminine kind of sees in the dark. Like we feel things. Our oracle is more attuned to the lunar. So I would say that those are some of the ways that men, it feels good to men to be respected for masculine qualities. I think that men being in service, this gets very this gets very distorted. For example, when men open car doors or any door, or men bring flowers, or men are in service to the feminine, I think that actually feels very good to a man's heart when it is received graciously, without entitlement. I think that when men give in general, men are built to give. We can look at it anatomically in every way. So when they are received by women, as I said, graciously, and in women authentically appreciating a man and what he chooses to gift or give us through his provision, is something that's actually very precious to men. I don't want to speak on behalf of men. I'm careful not to do that, but that is what I see over and over. Like these are the receptive, appreciative feminine in a woman is incredibly organically enlivening to a masculine man when it's not contorted, when she's not behaving in that way, but when that's true for her, when it's true for her.
I can imagine that people listening to this episode are going, that all sounds great. I can't find that man. And how do I find him? And so what would you say to women who say, yeah, I would love a man to take the lead. I would love for a man to, impose his goodness onto the world and see the big picture and do all these amazing things. And I would love to receive, but the men I meet aren't like this. And so what would you say to them?
I think that the first place to begin is that there's a level of self-responsibility in this that can be, it can sting, because just because a woman is a great woman doesn't mean she's like brilliant in her feminine. Like true feminine nature is a ride for modern Western brilliant women. So there is usually layers and calcification that we have to move through inside of a woman in order for her to touch that level of vulnerability within herself. It can be very kind of a trembly feeling. And so I think that women need to, who are looking for partnership, most often need to allow much greater vulnerability in her own feeling state. I feel like she needs to let go of the instinct to come forward in order to control a situation so that she gets to kind of feel more comfortable. That's a way that we can block some of the deeper vulnerability. I love women when they just go out and sit in a cafe, and you began this, Sandy. This is kind of a beautiful full circle with like, love your body. Oh my gosh, if women could love, if they could allow themselves to love being a woman and let themselves be seen and felt in that loving of themselves, loving being a woman, loving the beauty of our bodies, that frequency is incredibly magnetic to, well, men and women. I think it's a huge service. That level of embodiment is such a beautiful service to the world, but that level of embodiment is very powerfully magnetic to the masculine. So when a woman can bear the vulnerability of, it's kind of like being the egg, you know, sitting somewhere by herself, emanating her beauty, organic beauty, how good it feels for her in those moments to just be in the beauty of being a woman, that these moments when we string them together within relationship and when we're looking for a relationship are like a very profound blessing. So I think that women, there's like a stripping down that needs to happen so that women can truly be in their organic beauty, their longing, the vulnerability of what it truly requires to magnetize and receive from a potent masculine man. It's a big, big experience for women and for feminine women. Like, we say we want it and we do, we're built for it, but oh my gosh, it can be a very big journey, a big experience.
Very big. And I've had lots of successful women in my practice who are wanting to control every aspect. And when they don't hear from a man, it's like, oh my God, what do you think it means? Should I text him back and let him know how I feel about him not texting me? And it's so much of self-reflection on how we're showing up and how we learn to receive. I mean, receiving is so hard for women. I learned from my mom, who really has trouble asking for help and receiving help. And just today she was telling me, and she's 91, she was away for the weekend and she goes, nobody helped me bring my suitcase to the car. I probably should have asked them, but they were busy. And I'm like, you're 91, you could have fallen down the stairs. It's like,
they were busy.
They were
that's
busy.
A beautiful example of how women will put the needs of others before themselves in order to avoid the vulnerability of asking, and even one level deeper, receiving. Like receiving is like this glorified thing in the world. But I'm like, oh my gosh, I call it the ring of fire. It is. Receiving can be very high sensation. The word I want to say is painful, but I'm trying to avoid establishing that and reifying that narrative. But it is so confronting and very high sensation for many women, because we have to unwind in that single moment and choose being vulnerable. And it is both darling and like, oh my gosh, your mom, Sandy, 91 years old. Yeah. And the fact that she wasn't helped is like already a problem. But the fact that then she couldn't say like, hey, it would feel great to receive some help here. Yeah. Your moment. Mhm.
Very, very vulnerable to ask for help and to receive help and to receive a compliment. You know, the deflection that women do. Oh, this old thing, I bought this on sale. Oh, it's old. I've had it in the back of my closet. Instead of just saying thank you. Thank you is a gift, you know, and I think that so many women and men have trouble receiving compliments as well. But I think we have been programmed to deflect, to act like we need nothing from anyone. And I think that one of the things I help women do is to let men know that they may be independent in their lives, but they don't want to make all the plans in their love life, and they don't want to be leading in this part of their lives. You know, like it's important to articulate what it is that you want and need. And I would love to hear what you have to say about women who say that they intimidate men, because I think that's a crock, honestly. But I would love to hear what you have to say.
You have to say about that too. Yeah, I'm in the crock department of that as well. So I think that that is I think that can be a true experience for some women, but I think that the way that they're showing up that creates that experience, I think it's compensatory. Women who intimidate men are in their heads. They're not in their bodies. This doesn't mean that some men cannot be a little bit overwhelmed when a woman is in, deep emotion, but that's different than what we're talking about, which is that heady way that women kind of can outsmart men or be fast, kind of manipulate the situation to look good. I think that right there is one of the keys to when men are like, I feel intimidated. I don't actually think men feel intimidated either. I think that that's something that men have said when they're actually turned off, like when they're not interested in a woman. So I think it's a crock. It's like a double crock. I think it's a crock on both sides. Masculine men are not going to be intimidated by a woman. They're going to be turned off by her if she's in a state that creates a description of quote unquote being intimidated.
Well said. So that's pretty much my thoughts around this. It's not about, there are men who are scared of certain women because they're insecure themselves, and women who come across as overbearing, or just talk about themselves a lot and their accomplishments. I used to think that I needed to impress men with my accomplishments when I first started dating after my divorce. It was like, oh, I should tell them how busy I am and how full my life is, and I'm fulfilling my passions. And they would be like, you have no time to date, so I'm not going to date you. And so I think that what happens is, you said about being in your head versus your body. It's that guardedness and that sometimes bossiness or proving energy that is not really about being present. It's not about being vulnerable. It's not about your softer sides. And so what I want to really emphasize here is that we're not saying don't be all of who you are. Like, really encouraging women to be these amazing, successful, passionate beings. But when we disregard the feminine parts of us in our romantic relationships and relationships with men, we don't connect to their hearts. We connect to their heads, and we want to connect to their hearts. And so I always say, bring your whole self, lead with the feminine, and bring the rest of you along. What do you have to say to women who are saying, like, oh, you want me to be fake and give up all these other parts of me?
Right. So that's one of the key things I teach as well. I'm like, this is not about contortion. This is about like an unwinding, because in our culture and society, what we have been rewarded for is how we perform. From little girls, good grades, gymnastics. That's one of the ways that I earned, like, I felt like I was earning my dad's love. It's like he would be so proud of me when I did X, Y, and Z well. And there's a goodness and a rightness in that. But the distortion inside of that is I need to perform. I need to earn in order to receive love. And I feel like so many women have had that so deeply like inculcated within them and kind of calcified with that within them, that sometimes I will say things so directly, Sandy, where I'm like, he doesn't care. Like, he doesn't care about when you say like the proving energy. He wants a woman who can be in the fullness of her woman, in permission of her feminine, in her permission of, I can open the door. Of course, we all can. But there is a grace in allowing a man to open a door for us because he gets to feel good about what he just did. It's like in service to him. So as we receive, so when we understand that this is never about contortion, this is about full expression, but we have to be able to be in full approval and permission of our feminine as much as we have been rewarded for the masculine. So that can be kind of like a reordering for women, like a reorganization that I think can be confused as, oh, you're trying to, this isn't authentic. It is authentic. It's being sourced in a different part of you that you may just be getting to know. And that may be new. It's not contortion. It's not a lack of authenticity. Men want a full spectrum woman, including her brilliance, but she has to be able to, when I say full spectrum, it has to include the fullness of her feminine too. And that is what often kind of is either diminished or disorienting, or women are not in approval of what actually feels good to her body, because that may be confronting to what actually feels good to her ego and her sense of self as a modern, woman independent of the Western world. That sometimes that deep current of the feminine can be confronting. It's like we want it so much, but it can be confronting to our identity. So that's a pickle. I think that's another one of these tender spots for women, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think also just to what's coming up for me as you're talking is that we also want a full spectrum man. Like, I know that I'm attracted to men who have a toughness and a confidence and competency, but also a softness and an ability to connect deeply with his heart. I don't want a one-note man. I want a full spectrum man. So I think if women can look at it maybe in that light, that what we want in a partner is what we need to bring to partnership.
I love that. That feels like a really beautiful understanding and frame for women. Like, that feels really good.
So as we come to a close here, I would love to hear your thoughts on your best advice for anyone who wants to go on their last first date.
To actually have fun, like to be in her joy, to be in her body, to notice what feels good to her. I think that being in our body instead of being in our head and judging and analyzing everything, but to be in the truth of like, oh, that feels good. Oh, this feels so nice, because it may be different than what the story of the identity and the experience, like what the narrative is. Can I tell a tiny little story, Sandy?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had a dear friend, and she was dating in her late 40s and 50s. And she was going out on a date with this man named Chris, and they were in a hotel lobby waiting for like a table in the restaurant at the hotel. And for some reason, there was some kind of delay. And so she said she fell asleep, like they were sitting there quietly, not like deep sleep, but she said she kind of came to and her head was resting gently on his shoulder. And she said to me, God, Jillian, I was so bored on that first date that like I kind of dozed off a little bit and like found myself with my head resting on his shoulder. And I was like, hold the phone here for a second. Like, were you actually so bored? This is the mind, the chatter of the mind. Or was your body so sweetly relaxed that you were able to kind of, as you're waiting, like slip into this like little candlelit, like they're waiting in a little alcove moment as the table would, like, it felt sweet to me. They've been married for 14 years now. Beautiful, beautiful blended family. And she will say, gosh, if you hadn't reframed that for me, I would have chosen not to see that man again, because I would have told myself the story that I was so bored, when in fact, her body had been able to slip into kind of this sweet, extremely relaxed, like her body felt so safe, so sweetly quiet that it had like a little few moments of just slipping into this quiet state. That feels to me like a pretty profound example of like, oh my gosh, be in your body, allow the fun, allow the truth of what's arising without being in your head to judge and analyze and often criticize and control the experience. So like slip into what feels good and stay attuned to your body, not the conversation that your mind is having about all the things.
That's a great story and a beautiful reminder about the importance of staying in your body. Really hard, because we are not raised to do that at all. We are raised to do the opposite. And I think this is the practice as we grow as people and we evolve, to go back to the body. I mean, little kids know what their bodies feel. They are extremely attuned, and then it gets knocked out of us. And so go back to the wisdom of your body, because your body is so wise and such an important thing. Jillian, you have a free gift for our audience. Could you tell us what that is?
I have written a beautiful guide, 8 ways to cultivate feminine allure, that are kind of reflections of some of the conversation points that you and I have had together here, Sandy, all about being in the truth and the organic, authentic expression. So this is not behavioral. This is what already exists inside of woman, and how to bring a little bit more attunement and permission and rightness of these beautiful qualities.
That sounds wonderful. So you can grab that at devotion.gifts. And you also have a website. I would love for you to give us that link, and the rest of your links will be in the show notes.
FeminineEros.com is where you can learn a little bit more about the offerings and the experiences I create for women. And then my blog, I'm a fairly prolific essayist. So I have something like 70 essays on GillianPothier.com. So 2 different, where they can read my sometimes quite sizzling essays, all in service of love.
Thank you so much, Jillian, for this really enriching conversation. I know it can be triggering for a lot of people to hear about masculine and feminine. We're trying to get away from these kinds of terms in our society today. And I think there's a lot of value to having these conversations and to really helping us to understand ourselves better.
Thank you so much. You were such a lovely host, Sandy. I really enjoyed myself.
And thanks everybody for listening. If you love our show, we really would appreciate if you rated, reviewed, follow on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, here's to your last first date. If you are ready to get unstuck, gain new tools, become more empowered, and finally find your last first date, I'd love to talk to you. Fill out an application to be considered for a complimentary half-hour love breakthrough session at lastfirstdate.com/application.